Please be seated, those in the back. Good morning. Today, with this ringing of our peace bowl, we affirm our collective hope for peace. We acknowledge that these lands that we love are the ancestral lands of the Yavapai people, the Wipukepas, the Tokapayas, the Quevkapayas, and the Yavapai. We give thanks for the rain we have had these last few days, but we also hold those communities and lands being affected by the heat waves around the world and the wildfires. Welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Prescott, Arizona. I'm Tracy Augustine, your worship associate today. It's wonderful to be here with you and also to be back at Granite Peak. For those who maybe missed me, I've been gone for the last month with my husband, Chris. We were fortunate enough to spend time in Europe with family, and we were able to visit Amsterdam, Belgium, Switzerland, and then finally, my parents joined us in Portugal for a week, so very grateful for that. But as the saying goes, there's no place like home. We are glad you are able to join us here in person, and for those on Zoom, I see Joan. Hi, Tom. Hi, James. Welcome to those on Zoom as well, and we hope you are all in good health. Please take a moment, if you haven't already, to set your phones on worship mode. This is the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate, spiritual people, a community that celebrates diversity, nurtures our personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. As you probably know, our minister, Patty Willis, and our music director, Mary Lou Prince, are on vacation until the end of July. So in advance, I'd like to thank Dave Grishaw Jones, our guest minister, who will be joining us by video, and Lena Hubin, our pianist, and all our Sunday morning volunteers who helped with today's service. That includes Deidre Schwartz in the back, who's doing tech. Thank you, Deidre. I am very excited to share Dave Grishaw Jones with you, Chris's and my former UCC minister from when we lived in Denver. And I'll tell you more about him shortly. Please stay after the service to visit with each other in the sanctuary. For those that are here, we have coffee and some water in the Davis Hall. If you are viewing the service on Zoom, there will of course be breakout rooms for you all after the service. If you're joining us for the first time, please check out the website at prescottuu.org for more information about us. Are there any visitors here for the first time or who haven't been here for a long time? Could you stand up and introduce yourself? Welcome. Is it Kathy? Is that right? Welcome, Kathy. Kathy said for those on Zoom that she's new to Prescott and she loves it here. Great to have you. Anybody else? Yes, please. Thank you, Peter. For those on Zoom, Peter said that this is his second visit here and his values are our values. I think couldn't have said it better myself. We're very glad to have you here, Peter. Welcome. Anybody else? Okay, well, you are welcome to stop at our visitors table, both of you, which will be in when you first walked in the hall. After the service, and please do stay and chat with a member or two and have some coffee or beverages. Because it's just me up here and our guest speaker is on video, I didn't want you to get bored by the sound of my voice. So I'm changing things up a little bit. So the people on Zoom, this would be a good time for you to stand, stretch, get your own coffee if you haven't already done that. And let's take a few moments now to greet each other in the sanctuary. The Peace Bowl comes in handy. Before we begin our service, I have a few announcements to highlight. We have many things going on outside of the service, such as our politics and religion discussion group. That should be interesting. I've been wanting to go to that. Our faith development classes for adults and the Children's Faith Development Program led by Bev and Robert, who are meeting in the Faith Development Building across the street. You can read all the announcements in the order of service, the weekly Peak newsletter, and on our website and of course, Reverend Patty's videos for updates and announcements. I do have a couple of things to note. If you didn't remember, today, the Arizona Philharmonic has a concert at the Highland Center at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock. There are still tickets. I checked this morning. Tickets are $30. This one is called Three Musicians, a cello, a flute, and a clarinet. I'm going to try to go. I haven't figured out which time yet. And also the Queer Young Adult Meetup is next Sunday, July 24th from 4 to 5:30 p.m. Our Sanctuary Transformation team is asking you to complete a short survey on possible upcoming projects. Surveys were just emailed from the office, and they are also available today in Davis Hall after this service. So when you go into Davis Hall, you'll see a suggestions box and the surveys. You may complete one right here and put it in the box provided, or you can take it home and return it later. There is a space for extra comments. Note, if you haven't noticed, that the sanctuary's front steps already have a base coat of goldish tan. That's better than the gray. And the next coat may be a muted green to better match our present colors. As I said before, I wanted to introduce you and talk a little bit about our guest speaker. Although he's not here today, I want to tell you a little more about him. He is an ordained minister in the UCC, the United Church of Christ. He has served in congregations in Seattle, in Denver, in Cambridge, and now New Hampshire. Presently, he's the pastor of the Community Church of Durham on the campus of University of New Hampshire, not Durham, North Carolina. Chris and I came to know him when we lived in Denver from 1993 to 1996. So you can tell how special this person has been in our lives. We're still in contact with him and still enjoy listening to some of his sermons. Dave was actually instrumental in getting Chris and I should say, Chris, raise your hand just so people know who I keep talking about. He was instrumental in getting Chris and I back to a church at all, frankly. We had not been for a number of years, and it was because of that congregation and his ministry that we came back and ultimately joined the UCC church, and were active members of 6th Avenue UCC while he served there and we lived there. Dave is also on vacation this month, or he would have been able to join us via Zoom, but he generously pre-recorded the reading and message back in June. He also donated his honorarium back to Granite Peak, which was very generous, and said, let that be a gift for our congregation. I think he's a gifted thinker, writer, and speaker, and I hope you will find his message meaningful. We begin our service in the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Chris Hawthorne. Since our message today is abundance is our calling, I chose this passage from The Working Preacher, written by Professor Caroline Lewis for our chalice lighting. We have so modified and codified abundance, it's hard to recognize it anymore. And some have so monopolized abundance, hoarded it, thinking that it is theirs to control, theirs to possess, and even theirs to take away, theirs to keep for themselves, because those without it, well, clearly they have not merited God's attention or earned God's graces. But being on the receiving end of abundance is never for abundance alone, especially not for yours alone, but it is for the sake of seeing the absence of it in others and doing something about it. For those present in the sanctuary, please stand in body or spirit and sing our opening hymn. We're going to keep our masks on. And because I'm in the choir, I decided we're going to put the gray hymnals out on your seats. So if those who want to see the music, of course, we'll have the lyrics on the slides. But if you want to join along in the hymnal, go to number 128. And I'm going to have Russ join me so that I can actually do a better job of singing along with you. So it's number 128, For All That Is Our Life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For life is a gift, which God the call to use to build the common good and make our home days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Russ. Now, please join me in saying the words to our covenant. Love is the doctrine of this congregation, the quest for truth its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together. As life holds for us, we all have sorrows to bear and joys to celebrate. We are thankful for the rain that is so needed here in Prescott, and we can celebrate with that high desert smell and the colors of green popping up all around. We are also joyful that Cindy Pierce made it to Minneapolis, found a new job and a place to live near her family. Although, of course, the choir and Granite Peak will miss her. We also continue to hold Karen Hagberg, who is in California, celebrating the life of her brother, Gordon. It looked like it was a lovely celebration. We also hold Joanne Fogel, who we know has had some medical issues. Now I invite you to give the names of the people on your hearts and minds, either in the chat or say their names in the sanctuary, and I'll repeat it back as needed. Jane Eldridge. Janer. Janer Eldridge. That's wonderful. Fred was saying that Jack Stanton is on the mend and they have managed his medication and he's doing quite well. Anybody else? Yes. Is that Susie Moss? Susie Moss. We hold Susie Moss. Shannon Reardon. Anybody in the chat? I don't see any messages. I would like to hold my friend Patrick Lynch and his wife who lost their son tragically, 27 years old last week. Jason. Okay, well then let us be silent for a moment. For all the concerns and joys not spoken aloud today, may our spirit embrace you and our love fill your heart. So may it be. Please sing these words of comfort. I think we have to go back. Oh, somehow we lost our walking with you, or I'm out of order. There we are. Walking with you is my prayer. As we prepare to take the offering this morning, let us embrace the feeling of connection and community that we have when we gather here each week. Let us remember that this congregation and its programs are supported by your generosity. We also give back to the greater community through our Seeds of Support program. This month's recipient is the Coalition for Compassion and Justice, CCJ, a service and a solution to those living in homelessness. Please read more about them in your order of service. To give online, you can go to prescottuu.org/giving, and on the bottom left-hand side, click on Support Granite Peak to contribute. The link is also, I think, yes, it's available in your chat for those who are on Zoom through PayPal. Please enjoy this offertory music, Imaginary Landscapes, played by Lena. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through this offering. What is given in love is received in gratitude. Blessed be. We'll now hear from Dave Grishaw Jones from that pre-recorded video I mentioned. He starts with a reading from the Bible and draws on Christian traditions. Chris and I listened to this last week, and I did find that it will be relevant, I think, to all faiths, and really not just our community, but our nation as a whole. It's quite timely and relevant. Let's listen.
Good morning, friends in Arizona. It's a great joy for me to be with you in your gathering this morning, and an even greater joy to have been invited to participate with you by my longtime friend, Tracy Augustine. I remember Tracy and Chris going back many years to a congregation we participated in Denver, Colorado, and it's a great privilege for me to be trusted enough by Tracy all these years later that she invited me to preach and to share a message with you in this format that we've learned to pull off over these last couple of years. I am a United Church of Christ pastor, have always been. I've been doing that for about 30 plus years, serving a congregation these days in New England, in New Hampshire on the seacoast, in the university town of Durham, which is home to the University of New Hampshire. And indeed, I served along the way in a whole bunch of different college communities. But what I want to say about the United Church of Christ that I think is relevant is that we are cousins in so many ways, really, really close cousins to our friends in the Unitarian Universalist world and community. The two communities, the two denominations, the Congregationalists and the Unitarians obviously grew up together in the same places, in the same homes, in the same churches, and have traveled some different paths along the way. But over the course of my career in ministry, I've worked very, very closely with Unitarian friends, pastors, lay leaders on all kinds of peace and justice issues in particular, all kinds of other concerns. And so it's very easy for me to feel at home, even in this format, among my Unitarian Universalist friends and siblings. So thanks for the invitation, and thanks for the welcome into your fold. Because I am living in the world of the Christian church, and because I'm constantly trying to interpret Christianity in a lively, progressive spirit, I want to offer a message this morning that's grounded in that tradition, but again, very, very hopeful that this tradition sheds light on yours as yours does on mine, and that as we think about some of these things together from our different perspectives, we can grow and find strength and persistence and resistance together. So thank you for allowing me the space to do that. I want to read to you from a passage from the Gospel of John, which, to be honest, is not a part of the Christian story that we read all that often in this particular community. But this is a story I've been working on for the last couple of months, and beginning to find some real meaning and interest in. So this is from the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John in the Christian Scriptures. It's a very short story, but hopefully it'll gather some purpose and some meaning for us. It goes like this. After this, there was a festival of the faithful, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these 5 porticos lay many, many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long, long time, Jesus said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." And at once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk, and that day was a Sabbath day. So a little bit of architecture and history and geography. There are these different gates into Jerusalem in the ancient world. And one of these gates, known to John's community as the Sheep Gate, would have been that gate through which the faithful, the believers, would have brought sheep into the ancient city for sacrifice on a festival day, on a festival occasion. Because, of course, in the ancient world, not just in Judaism, but in many traditions, there was this deep sense that the sacrifice of animals was one of the ways to show faithfulness to God. And that was a way of thinking, a way of drawing close to divinity, a way of gaining God's favor. So there's this sheep gate, and through that sheep gate at the festival moment, all of these faithful folks would bring in their sheep. And very often, before they take the sheep up to the temple for this sacrificial moment, they would bring the sheep into one of these pools or one of these porticos in one of these pools to be washed off, so that that sheep was in pristine condition before it was brought up to the priests and sacrificed for the feast, sacrificed for the festival. And it's awful easy all these thousands of years later to be thinking about these things with our 21st century minds. And of course, the idea of animal sacrifice, of that kind of sacrifice, is in some ways just abhorrent to us. But again, in ancient cultures that were still very much growing, this was a very, very common practice. So this is one of those festival moments, and Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, is in Jerusalem, and he goes to one of these pools by the Sheep Gate. And it seems that there's something really, really important about his decision to go to that pool at that moment of that festival, and through that gate, through that Sheep Gate, into the pool area. It seems that Jesus might want to be saying something about the notion of sacrifice itself, about the notion of how it is we get right with the Spirit, how it is we get right with God, how it is that we get right with one another, how it is that we heal broken things. And perhaps Jesus is going to have some new things to say about that. So that's the backdrop, that's the setting, that's the geographical context for this particular story. Now, in the story itself, there's a strange and fierce spirit of competition, I think I'd say, around these pools of Bethzatha. And that spirit of competition manifests what I like to call a spirituality of scarcity. A spirituality of scarcity. And this is where we come in, because I think this is quite common still, and perhaps even at the root of some of the real crises that are facing us as a nation and as a people. Back to the story. When those waters get stirred up in that sacred pool, when the waters get stirred up somehow there, it's the tradition that only the first one in, after the stirring, only the first one in gets healed. So there's this kind of competition. There's this kind of physical jockeying that happens in that moment, and folks try to get into the pool to experience the healing that they believe so much that is happening in that pool. And this one fella in the story has been left out, has been sidelined for 38 years. He's living with paralysis, some kind of very deep and incapacitating sickness. He's been isolated by this illness for 38 years. And so he's kind of hanging out at the pool, but there's never been anyone to help him get to the front of the line. There's never been anyone to help him get into the pool. I have no one, he tells Jesus. I have no one to put me into that pool when the water gets stirred up. So just imagine that for a moment. Imagine the cruelty of that. The cruelty of that kind of healing, the cruelty of that kind of healthcare, if you will. If you're lucky, if you're privileged, if you've got the right friends, you get in. If you've got a strong and shifty community of folks around you who can slide you to the front of the line, you get in, you get healed. But if you don't, you don't. A strange and fierce spirit of competition, even in religious life, shows up in this story. As I say, I like to call it a spirituality of scarcity. And here's where Jesus, the Jesus that I'm still very much drawn to, asks a very important and unsettling question. Something like, what if, right? What if God's desire, God's passion, is not the ascendance of a few, but the rising, the healing, the wholeness of us all? What if God's desire, God's passion, is not a spiritual lottery, because that's really what you've got down here at this pool, a spiritual lottery. Some win, most don't. What if God's passions, God's desire is a circle of grace, a commonwealth of joy, a table of plenty? What if this spirituality of scarcity has it all wrong? And the nature of reality, the heart of creation itself, the passion of the Creator is abundance. I think that's what Jesus wants to do. Jesus wants to confront this spirituality of scarcity with a whole new vision, with a whole new version, with a religion of abundance, with an ethic of abundance. So interestingly, in the story, Jesus skips the pool part entirely, the healing by the pool part. He skips that part entirely. And this is odd because Jesus tends to like water a lot and tends to enjoy anointings of all kinds. But here he skips the pool part entirely. And he tells the fellow, stand up. He says, just stand up, he says to this lovely, lovely man. Stand up, take your mat, and walk away. You don't need this pool. You don't need this little ritual, this competitive ritual. You don't need to have special friends to get you to the front of the line. Just stand up, take your mat, and walk away. Wholeness, Jesus says to this fellow who's been waiting for his wholeness for 38 years. Wholeness, Jesus says, is your birthright. And that same man, I imagine, that same man looks at the pool one last time and he smiles at Jesus, and then he takes up his mat and he walks away. Friends, I think this is something like the calling to religious communities today, Unitarian Universalist communities, Christian communities, religious communities of all kinds, to identify this spirituality of scarcity in politics, in economics, in religion, especially in religion, and then to turn towards God's, the divine commonwealth of joy, God's table of plenty, if you will. Abundance is our religious calling. Abundance is our calling. Kindness is our way, and generosity is the path that leads us to the promised land. We come in the church, in the fellowship, we come from all walks of life. We love in many ways. We have seen many sorrows, and we dream many dreams. In my own community, in the Christian tradition, we believe that the Spirit of the living God creates a space, a circle, a promise for all of us. Young and old, small and tall, gay and straight and trans, black and white, immigrant and native, and the rest of us, all of us. No one sits on the sidelines for 38 years. That's not who we are. No one is turned away from our table because it's God's table. And I'll add that for me in the Christian tradition, the way that we tend to orient our worship here is around a table. I don't want everyone just looking at me for 59 minutes. I want folks looking at one another across a table, gathering as gay and straight and trans and brothers and sisters and black and white and young and old and questioning and believing. We're gathered around God's table of plenty, and we're looking at one another as we worship. Let me just say this as a connection to what we've all been living with over these last couple of weeks. That young boy who marched into a Buffalo supermarket with hatred and racism and murder on his mind, and that other young boy who walked into a Texas school so confused and with hatred on his mind and murder in his heart. Those two boys were somehow raised on a spirituality of scarcity, right? My heart, our hearts, I know your hearts, our hearts break for the people of Buffalo and Uvalde, and especially for the communities, the Black community in Buffalo, the Latinx community in Uvalde, these communities that continue to pay the highest price for violence in our country. This spirituality of scarcity is in many ways a deadly force in our politics and in our nation today. So we come to church, we come to the fellowship, and in our community we come to the table of plenty that's got bread and wine and abundance heaped up upon it. We come to the table of plenty to grieve for the people of Buffalo and Uvalde, and then to receive God's defiant promise of abundance. God's defiant promise of abundance for all of us. We come to the table of plenty to feast together and to pray together and to come up with action plans together and to know at the table the love that knows no bounds, the love that knows no ending, the love that knows no limitation and no meanness at all. See what I'm talking about? Where Jesus is confronting the spirituality of scarcity and offering us a vision, a practice, a living practice of abundance. And this practice is our resistance. This practice is our hopefulness. This is the practice that points us in the direction of a viable future. So again, I want to thank you folks, and particularly my friend Tracy, for inviting me to be a part of your community this morning and to offer this message about scarcity and abundance. And I want to invite you to dig into your own traditions, your own history, the Unitarian Universalist tradition, which is so rich with the stories of prophets and activists and speakers and poets and folks who've resisted violence and injustice in so many ways, folks who've manifested a vision of inclusion and diversity within community. And I want you to keep at it, because I believe it's in our communities that we offer one another the best hope for overcoming the meanness and overcoming the politics of division, and offering our kids a viable path forward that's not about scarcity, and that's not about fear, and that's not about rage and anger, but that's about collaboration, cooperation, and communion. I think that's what the Unitarian Universalist tradition is all about. I think it's what our congregational tradition is all about. It's why we're cousins in this journey, and why we need to keep working together in all the years to come. I hope it's okay with you that I finish with a prayer. That's kind of how we do it, and I pray for you and I pray for me. God, I pray for my friends in Arizona this morning as they worship, that some piece of this story and some dimension of this message might land upon their open hearts and offer some hope, some courage for the future. We call you by many names, and we have many questions about you and about your presence in the world, and we bring those questions to worship as well. In the midst of all of that, help us to see a future together, which is built around the notion that all can be fed, and that all can be healed, and that all can know the fullness and the abundance of life. This is your intention, that we might live together in justice, in communion and community. From Arizona to New Hampshire, from Denver, Colorado to Massachusetts, and all the places in between. All these prayers we offer to you in your many names, the names of justice and mercy and joy, and we offer them all with gratitude. Amen and amen. Again, my many thanks to you folks. Sorry, I got a little computer need to pull it back up there. Again, many thanks to you all, and I wish you all well. Hope that our paths will cross at some point very, very soon. Blessings.
Ooh, I'm so glad that video worked. I hope you found that meaningful. Yes, I wish he could be here, but maybe at some point Dave will be able to visit out here and meet all of you. So thank you for participating in that. So our closing hymn, if you would like to use the gray hymnal, it's also in the gray hymnal. It's number 6, Just As Long As I Have Breath. So for those who are present in the sanctuary, please feel free to stand in body or spirit and sing along with us. Probably good to keep the masks on just to be on the safe side. And Russ is going to join me again.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I made my way, still with hope I meet each day. If they ask why I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long
you. Thank you for joining us today here or on Zoom. Before we extinguish our chalice, Lena is going to play one of my favorites and a very fitting postlude piece for the theme of abundance, Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing by Robert Robinson. Thank you, Lena. We just got a chat from Karen. What a nice way to spend an hour at the airport. Thanks and miss you all. Aw. Safe travels, Karen. We'll see you soon. With the extinguishing of our chalice, our worship time has ended and now our service begins. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I now invite you to take as much time as you would like to visit with friends and visitors. Those online, you may now go into the breakout rooms. Those who are here, remember we have that survey in Davis Hall and some coffee and beverages. Thank you. Thank you.